Welcome to another episode of Convos in the Pedicab with my buddy Kevin Peters. He actually he led the protest in New York City against the mandates. So we're due for an episode. I'm excited. It's I believe this is the first episode to start the new year. So I'm pumped. We're ready.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Good to be here.
Good to be here. Yes, sir. I'm pumped. I'm ready. So how you feeling?
I feel great. It's like we're strapped in. We're ready for whatever comes next in 2024. Like, I don't know. There's this ominous feeling that something crazy could happen. Crazy things are already happening. But if we could get through 2020 and 2021, we can get through anything. That's how I feel.
Do you think something ominous is going to happen in 2024 though?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of these folks, like our friends in Geneva, Switzerland, and our friends in Washington, D.C., seem to be indicating that any combination of war and pestilence and famine and power grid
correct
shut
term
off
is called a polycrisis.
Okay, I
That's
like
what
that.
They say we are in a series.
I think that's
polycrises.
pretty accurate. It could be any one or all of the above. And at the end of the day, if it was several years ago, I would have been in a frenzy trying to track everything and anticipate what's going to happen. But I think it's important to stay grounded and positive and that sense of centeredness and control of your own life, and that whatever comes, God is in control. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but you also have to still do the work too.
Yep.
How did you feel going into 2020? How did you on January 1st, 2020, or let's say January 2nd, 2020, after the New Year's hangover wore off? How did you feel going into 2020?
I mean, I was doing okay. I'm
not talking about you personally. I'm saying how did you feel about this?
About the world?
Yeah. How did you feel about everything? How do you feel about the future of this country?
I think so in the case of New York, I was in Brooklyn. I was working odd jobs. I know I'm talking about myself, but in terms of what's going on with the world, I had already dealt with fighting back against the mandates or the exemption repeal for the babies in New York.
Okay.
In 2019. This was before COVID.
Yes.
You had the repeal of religious exemptions, just like in California, for any child to go to public school. This is for the MMR shots and the regular schedule shots that have been well documented to have causal links to autism, anaphylaxis, sudden infant death syndrome, as they like to call it. So I had jumped down this rabbit hole about the dangers of the pharmaceutical industry. I had no idea what was going on supposedly in China and the development of mRNA shots. But there was an ominous feeling.
You had an ominous feeling, really, because I remember back in 2020, everybody had 2020 vision. Everybody was actually very optimistic.
That's true.
Back when 2020 first started, right before COVID happened, there was an air of lightheartedness and optimism. There was an air of levity circulating.
Yeah.
Back in 2020.
Absolutely.
And then COVID happened and everything went into chaos. And right now, there's an air of ominous concern heading into 2024. And so, just based on what happened in 2020, my dark horse prediction is that there actually is a possibility that nothing may happen this year.
Yeah, totally. That's a good point. It's possible.
But just because nothing may happen this year doesn't mean that you shouldn't be preparing. And it's actually a good thing. I actually would not be surprised if nothing were to happen this year, and there's a bunch of reasons why.
Interesting. This is the first time I'm hearing this take. Please explain.
And it's because I think that we're a little bit psyoped out.
Yeah.
I think we're psyoped out. I think that
no one believes anything anymore.
Nobody believes anything anymore. We're psyoped out. Nobody's going to want to trust Nobody's going to want to like trust the experts. Nobody's going to like believe any mainstream narratives. And you can't like achieve New World Order tyranny unless people are willing to actively go along and serve the New World Order. Like in 2020, you know, when COVID happened, people were shaming. The reason that this thing worked, and it didn't work long term, but the reason that it worked for the time that it did is because people were like shaming each other, like for not wearing masks. They were shaming each other. Like I was losing friends because I didn't think we should be doing lockdowns. Even during Delta variant, you know, people were calling me all types of names because I didn't want to get a vaccine. And that was my line in the sand, and that's when they started issuing these mandates. You know, and so there was a large army of people connected through nonprofits that were using an ideology to get the public to consent with this. Now, with how everything is kind of played out, I don't see how that materializes.
Yeah.
But what I do see right now is that we're in an election year,
Right.
and you know, there's a saying. There's got Albert Pike. I'm sure you've heard this, but he said, you know, give the people when the people need a hero, we will deliver it to them.
Yeah. Albert Pike had a lot of interesting sayings in his day.
Okay, so give the people what, you know, when the people need a hero, we will deliver them the hero. Okay, and what happened with Twitter? Elon Musk bought Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
People think Elon Musk is a free speech hero. Twitter is a lot better than he used to be, but he's definitely not a free speech hero. And the reason I'm saying that is because, okay, some of my videos trolling council meetings and some of my inflammatory videos because they play because they are like for the right wing, quote unquote, they'll get a lot of views. But they also only get a lot of views because I mass send them to big accounts and they like my stuff and they share it.
Yeah.
So I'm not even sure if my organic reach is that much higher. I might just know more people. And also B, like, you know, if you were to start doing podcasts on homesteading and on how to self-custody your Bitcoin, you know, and how to grow your own food and how to like actually prepare and build communities to manage the next disaster, that stuff is going to get stifled. I bet. I would not be surprised if that stuff is getting stifled to the bottom of the algorithm, or if you were like sharing your Nostr code, or if you were sharing like different ways to build outside the system, that stuff would not even be that stuff would be stifled by any Elon Twitter.
I mean, it's hard to tell at this point with like the metaverse and AI, like whether we're dealing with an algorithm or if there's any human beings at all involved at this point.
Well, there's a lot of
Silicon
AI.
Valley.
I listened to like Whitney. I listened to Whitney Webb talk to Natalie Brunell and Marty Bent recently on TFTC. Yeah, I think it was TFT.
That one.
Yeah,
I was just listening to her. With
no,
Kim
the
Iverson.
rabbit hole recap. That's what it's called. The rabbit hole recap.
Okay.
That's not TFTC. It's the rabbit hole recap. TRTC. Okay. I get those confused. But I was listening to that and
Love Whitney.
She's great actually. She's like who you should be getting your news from. And she also has not been canceled or called out by anybody because nothing she says is based on hatred. It's just very matter of fact. It's just sharing research and data.
Right.
You know. But who's getting like who is generating the most hype in conservative circles? Alex Jones, Andrew Tate. Love Alex Jones, but you know, Whitney Webb is a more credible source of information than Alex Jones.
I would agree.
I mean, that's
both,
a fact. They're both awesome.
Deep researchers.
They're both deep researchers. They're both awesome. They both put themselves out there. They're both playing an important role to preserving our freedoms. But in terms of trusting it as a source of news.
Right.
Whitney Webb is a way better source of news.
There's no sensationalism. It's just like facts upon first, you know, primary sources, you know.
And explaining what is actually happening.
Right.
And deconstructing the myths and deconstructing all the myths.
Yeah.
And another myth that a lot of people are holding on to is the fact that they still think that Donald Trump is going to save them. And who is the leading candidate in the Republican primaries? I mean, provided that you believe the polls, which I think are about as real as Michelle Obama being a woman.
Just about.
But you know, Trump is leading in these polls. Everybody's kind of is hyping up Trump. The hatred amongst him from the left isn't really there anymore, or it's not as visceral as it used to be. There actually is. You know, if you look at the trends in Europe in terms of like Europe's getting more right wing and Argentina got Milei, And Milei's done some good stuff. He's cut a lot of agencies back and whatnot, But at the same time, he's still employing a lot of the same bankers that destroyed the Argentine economy in his cabinet. And then you look at Trump. He didn't drain the swamp. He hired the swamp, and then the swamp drained him. You look at that, and you look at like the fact that they're priming us for a Donald Trump comeback. Nothing could. The reason I think nothing could happen is because I think that this could be another attempt to lull us back into complacency.
Absolutely. I think that in a way that's just as bad as like total chaos.
I think it's worse.
Yeah.
I think it actually could be worse in the long term, potentially, if people don't understand that.
Right.
Because when Trump was president, we had QAnon. We had people trusted the plan. Nobody went out and ran for office. Nobody went out and actually spoke their mind on genuine issues to preserve like our freedoms and liberties. It was all about trying to get clicks, and it was all about placating to whatever Donald Trump and his team wanted. And then when you actually like looked at who was on that team and what they were doing, it's the definition of conservative. Like the whole Trump MAGA movement, it really is the definition of conservative Inc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned QAnon and the whole child trafficking issue and these things that they dangle in your face, like, oh, we're gonna see accountability, we're gonna see all the names drop, we're gonna see tribunals, and all these fantasies are gonna come true about like the cabal and the deep state.
The intelligence agencies literally write these things out.
Here we are in 2024. They're like dripping out they're releasing the Epstein logs, the Epstein names, and it's like we literally learned nothing new that we didn't already know about Bill Clinton or Prince Andrew. Look at what Stephen Hawking said. Like, who cares?
And also a lot of those documents are just from a defamation suit. They're not even like real, actual, accountable documents to prove anything.
The past week they've been hyping it up, and they get people honest. They pull people's heartstrings to get them amped up. And
Do you actually believe that Stephen Hawking was like into that stuff? Like, if none of his body functions,
who cares? That's why I say who cares.
But like his entire body doesn't even work. Like, how would somebody like Stephen Hawking even be able to have an erection or have any sexual desires when he can only use one part of his body, which was like his index finger?
Listen,
it just seems really weird to believe, right?
Whatever objection I think we can legitimately have against Stephen Hawking is totally like irrelevant to his disability and his physical,
I think it's hilarious. Like that Stephen Hawking is on the list, and he was talking about how there was no God and stuff like that, and all this does is just reaffirm your faith, which is a good thing.
It's it's like you said, it's clickbait.
It is clickbait. I mean, I think like I had a suspicion that COVID kind of got super hyped up right after Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself, and I always felt like the proliferation of that virus was to kind of distract people from the Epstein list, but you can only just distract people like that for so long, because I think that maybe these people thought that the public would forget about it and they would have their framework for like biomedical tyranny, and as a result of COVID they'd be able to just restrict the internet and create the fascist police that they wanted just through this virus, and they could try to make it go away, but it just didn't work because there was just more of us than them, and it kind of created an awakening. So now they're like, okay, well, I guess we got to release these documents because there's nothing else. Like, at this point, there's nothing else that we can do. And all it's going to really do is just get less and less people to trust the establishment, which also makes me think that it wouldn't even make sense for another disaster to happen, like another big disaster to happen. Because in order for like a big disaster to happen, you have to divide the public enough for it to work in your favor. And right now, if you get off the internet, the public is not that divided.
I think there's plenty of
on the ground, we're a lot more united than we are on the internet.
Right, but this is exactly why they did what they did in 2020, leading into the election in 2020. People think it's all about controlling the mail-in voting and just isolating people in their homes and keeping them from interfacing with each other in person. It
added to the division, because now people spend more time online where the division is.
Yes.
And the U.S. military has like thousands upon thousands of bots, and other foreign militaries have these bots, and the people and the Davos heads and probably the banking cartels own a ton of social media bots, and that's just that's a pretty obvious statement. And so when you're online on your computer all the time, you're being crafted narratives through bots curating information to you, versus being able to actually, find some trusted news articles and or trusted sources and having sensible discussions. There was no place for that, and I think that a lot of people got addicted to being on their computers, myself probably included, and it's going to create a situation where people are not going to be able to tell what's real and fake, and people are going to get so confused and so disoriented and so demoralized that the next time a big event occurs, the tyranny will come like that. But I don't think we're there yet. So that's why I'm kind of thinking maybe maybe it doesn't really happen this year.
Yeah, we're going to have to see. There's a lot at stake between elections and the geopolitical situation with BRICS and this escalation in the Middle East between Israel, Iran, the
Palestinians in Gaza,
the whole
Lebanon,
all players involved.
How do you feel about that?
I feel like October 7th.
I feel like me and you have a different view on Israel.
What makes you say that?
Because I'm Jewish and I have family who live there.
My dad is Jewish.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and I've made a lot of friends the past few years fighting against mandates and standing up for family values and for God and spirituality. I've made a lot of really important friendships with Israelis in New York and around the world who are speaking out against the technocratic agenda, the transhumanist agenda that goes against everything that we're taught in the Bible.
Yeah. So apparently, they are also using a lot of surveillance technology is being tested on Palestinians in the West Bank.
Right.
That is a true statement. And
yeah, that's true.
When you're Jewish and you know that your history and you understand how things are, you do understand the importance of being able to live in Israel because it's a holy place where you have a spiritual connection to,
yeah.
right? Like that's kind of one of those things where, like, regardless of the side you're on, Israel is a home for Jews, right? But just because it's a home for Jews doesn't justify using surveillance technology, like putting a group of people into an isolated area and trying to use trying to experiment with surveillance technology on them. Like that doesn't win you the plot for the ability to like maintain a Jewish state and actually prevent whatever happened in Germany when the pogroms and the forced migrations of Arab Jews into Israel, because a lot of Arab Jews in Muslim countries were treated as second-class citizens in the 1920s, and they were kicked out of their homes and treated probably just as bad, if not worse, than some of the Palestinians now, and that just doesn't get talked about. And when you have a country that's using surveillance technology on the Palestinians, and you have these cartoon villains running their government that are worse than probably Bush and Cheney, it makes it so that nobody wants to have that other discussion. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Well, if you're asking how I feel about it, honestly, the surveillance apparatus within Palestine is the least of
that's one
concern for Gaza and how many thousands of people have been killed at this point.
That's true.
Yeah,
I think that yeah,
none of that minimizes what happened on October 7th. I think
but the surveillance technology and the AI technology that's being used also provides wrong information to the IDF, which could also lead to...
How does it... I've never heard about this.
Because this is what Whitney Webb talked about. Okay. And it's that AI will hallucinate. And a lot of times people will think that AI, just because AI gives a response, it means it's correct. And so the AI will give a response as to where the terrorists are and where this is. And it just could be totally wrong. And then all of a sudden a bunch of kids get blown up.
That's really unfortunate. So
that could
that's really unfortunate.
That could kind of be that could be potentially what you're witnessing as well, and it's not getting brought up.
Well, I think that this is literally the first. I've been kind of avoiding. Here's the thing. When it comes to Israel Palestine, it's the most intrinsically divisive issue that like we were saying earlier, it pulls on people's heartstrings, just like with BLM and weaponizing the trauma of
Oppression.
oppression. Of
And-
oppression.
and these Free Palestine
you're
movements,
weaponizing the trauma.
these Free Palestine movements that I'm noticing in America, it's like BLM on steroids. It's the
Yeah.
same people that were destroying small businesses during BLM are the same people that are blocking highways and stopping people from getting to the airport as a result of freeing Palestine. And it doesn't gain sympathy to that struggle, to that cause at all.
Like, I went to one of these marches about a month ago. There's a group called Within Our Lifetime, which from what, there's all sorts of groups organizing things. There's stuff happening every single day in the case of New York City. And, you have Jewish Voice for Peace, who's like outwardly, proudly aligning themselves with communists. And the Democratic Socialists of America, and our friends at the People's Forum, which is like a total like foreign, it's a hotbed of so radical socialists from Venezuela and leftists from around the world who were implementing vaccine mandates long after the mandates were rescinded in New York City.
Yes.
So I don't want to have anything to do with any of these groups, like in terms of we can agree that we want to call for a ceasefire, whatever solution we want to put out there. Why are we injecting all this political and ideological baggage into the question of, okay, how do we stop the killing in places like Gaza and West Bank? Like what's our solution? Why are we talking about socialism and capitalism?
That's the thing too. When you have a communist group that calls themselves the Jewish Voice for Peace, they're not Jewish. You know why? Even if they say they are, because communism is like inherently it's anti-God, right?
Well, yeah,
and you can't call yourself a Jew, you can't call yourself a Christian, you can't call yourself a Muslim, you can't call yourself any religion of faith if you subscribe to an ideology that is antithetical to having faith.
It's such an important point, and I think it's in my opinion, you could say the same about George Soros and his whole ilk, and most of I would dare say, you may disagree on this, a lot of the folks in charge of the military and the government of the state of Israel. And I make the distinction between the state and the governmental apparatus
versus the people,
the nation,
the
people.
I feel like the Jews in Israel are going through the same struggle that the American people in the United States are going through, in that we are both being hijacked by corrupt government that does not actually bear the interests of their people in mind. Like I said, that is not getting talked about.
Yeah, and it's a cliche, but people say all roads lead to Rome. And with the question of Palestine, people forget, or people are never even taught the origins of the name Palestine.
Philistina, when the Romans conquered,
it goes back to the Philistines,
and threw the Jews out of Israel.
They named it after the Philistines to mock
the Jews,
who they expelled from the land at that time, wherever they went. This is 2,000 years ago. There's and it's so difficult because none of us, and it goes back to the Bible, like people's takeaways from the Bible, and if we're gonna talk about Israel's right to exist as a home for Jews, and like just using that language, the right to exist, like, are you implying we don't have a right to live? Where at the end of the day, it's the same dilemma that we have here in the United States, where you had Native Americans living here for however long, and you had European settlers, because people use the word colonizers and all these things to like inject emotion into it.
Crazy about the Native Americans?
What's that?
And it's that before the Pilgrims came, the Vikings had been trying to conquer. Had been trying to conquer that land
and
for like
hundreds
of years, and the Indians kept fucking them up, and the Vikings were never able to do that, right? So when they saw a bunch of white people coming on a boat, what do you think their reaction was to seeing a group of white people? It wasn't going to be good, because they had a prior experience to what happened with the Vikings. So you're an English settler who comes in to this new area, and all of a sudden the first thing that happens when you see these new people is they attack you. And that is what happened, because if the story about the Vikings is true, then it makes sense, right? And so then all of a sudden your first impression is these are savages because they just attacked you for no reason, and then
And then you invoke the Bible to justify
and then you
genocide.
And then everything that you see in conjunction that's kind of led up to this is where we're at today.
Yeah.
And then the big reason why we took the land from the Indians that took over them is not because you think we were stronger and more militarily capable than the Vikings?
Yeah, probably not.
No, absolutely not. No chance in hell. You know why? You know why we were able to take that land from them?
Well,
and it's not because of guns, because we also fought alongside natives in the French and Indian War and other conflicts. And you don't think that we gave them guns to help us? Mm-hmm. It's not guns. It's diseases. It's smallpox. We came through and we were fucking gross. We had smallpox. We had all types of pathogens that these people were not used to. They didn't have the medicine or know how to deal with any of this stuff, and they got killed and eradicated as a result of us bringing diseases over versus us brutally murdering them.
Yeah, you know what's unfortunate.
That never gets brought up.
What's unfortunate is like that's. I mean, that should be common knowledge in the history books about how many people just died because of. But at the same time, I'm kind of skeptical about that narrative.
You think so?
Because of what I now understand about pathogenic illness and about germ theory versus terrain theory, and our understanding of illness stemming from Louis Pasteur and Anton Béchamp and the 19th century scientists. That kind of, it's one of those things that we kind of take for granted and assume as absolute truth, whereas it's a lot more complicated than that. And it's probably true that we exposed something, we introduced something foreign to the terrain in America. But I don't know if
we
that,
still
if
had medicine to
that
deal
could be a narrative just
we
to
had
like
medicine though to deal with that. They did not have any kind of medicine or even know what this stuff was at all. Like I think that's very likely.
Yeah,
and there was also a lot of division amongst the native tribes, and we were able to pit those tribes against each other.
Yeah, probably all of the above. You know, like my suspicion is that the whole thing about smallpox is to like minimize the guilt and the responsibility for, you know, the
manifest destiny.
The manifest destiny.
Yeah.
And the like this is my destiny, you know.
Yeah. Boom. Break yourself.
Yeah. Protect your neck.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's all, there's a lot of factors. You know, and then
but we're dealing with it now with, you know, with BlackRock buying up all the, you know, all the private property, the housing market is just completely out of control, and people can't make their mortgage or their rent, and you have huge firms buying up all the property, and people are getting like packed into smaller and smaller and smaller. We're going through the same thing right now. People are being stripped of their land and their property, and you know, you have people like Bill Gates and the communist Chinese or whoever buying it all up. It's manifest destiny too.
Yeah, and there's also direct energy weapons like in Maui.
Exactly.
Potentially, there's a lot. There's a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff like that. There really is. But you know, with the Israel-Palestine conflict, people use the Native Americans as an example, and you know, some people look at it like, oh, the Israels are the white settlers taking land from the natives, and that's bad. But then when you say that the Israels are the natives because Israel belonged to the Jews, then they'll say, well, what, should the natives just take their country back? You know, so like it does feel like the whole it feels by and large that like the whole world or a large majority of the world is very much against Israel. Well, Israel being like a sovereign country.
Well, this is kind of what I've been trying. I've been trying to thread the needle with as much nuance as I can, and you know, point to the, you know, the irresponsibility of many people who are justifiably critical of Israel and painting this picture like it's Jewish power and it's Zionists and it's like a whole global conspiracy.
That's
like
bullshit. That
you know,
that.
And you know, you have people who I did like in the, you know, as a Christian, you read the New Testament, you hear about people who call themselves Jews who aren't Jews. You mentioned Jewish Voice for Peace. There's all sorts of people that we could debate about whose bloodline traces back to Jacob and the 12 tribes. At the end of the day, like
well, it's not about the bloodline. It's about you know, religion. It's about a path towards finding God, and You know, you could do that being Jewish. You could do that being Muslim. You could do that being a
Absolutely.
Christian. Like, you could do that as long as you do it however, you know, God speaks to you, right? And God doesn't
Absolutely.
make mistakes. So it's not even necessarily about a bloodline. It's about ascribing to a faith.
Right. Well, whether it's faith or like ethnic tribalism, like at the end of the day, you know, we have to hold people accountable if they're using genocidal talking points on either side.
Yes, I agree. But like in 1855, why would anybody in their right mind want to be a Jew versus be a Christian? It was probably a lot easier to be a Christian in 1855 than it was to be a Jew. So you wouldn't call yourself a Jew unless you really felt like a genuine commitment.
Well, is there something specific that happened?
I don't know. You had pogroms, it's a rough estimate. 1855, 1890, turn of the century.
That was
you know, during the Spanish Inquisition.
Okay.
You know, like there have been so many things that you know we've had to go through being Jews, right? Like, and I didn't even know your dad was Jewish, but like just having Jewish lineage, there's so much stuff that ancestrally you go through that you have to be smoking crack to voluntarily choose to have that religion over Christianity.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
unless you felt like a really strong spiritual connection to that religion.
Yeah.
Provided that your name isn't Jacob Rothschild.
I mean,
you know,
the same is true for the Catholic Church. You know, there's like, you know, I think, you know, the history of Christianity has been, I don't know. I think what's common between Jews, Christians, and Muslims around the world is that, like, the scriptural integrity of the faith and the connection with God has been like conflated and confused and radicalized and bastardized in a lot of, and I would include the Catholic Church. You know, my mother's Catholic. I was raised in the Catholic Church. You know, it's technically my stepdad. I never met my biological father.
Oh, okay.
But I'm raised in the Catholic Church, and like I'm living in a world now where I understand what the Pope represents. It has nothing to do with the first century church that the apostles founded.
Yes.
You know, and I think that unfortunately there's a lot of Jews who are having the same effect on the Jewish faith. And the true connection to God, you have, you know, certain Jews who are, you know, abusing children, doing these horrible things that you know give the Jewish people a bad name, and they don't deserve it. You know,
that's true. You also have Catholics that are doing it, and Catholics don't deserve it.
Exactly.
You have Muslims that fly planes into tall buildings without landing them. You know, they give Muslims a bad name. None of it's good.
You're talking about 9/11 now?
Potential. Well, it's a hypothetical, right?
Were there planes?
Who knows? Well, jet fuel doesn't melt the steel beams, you know. Yeah, like buildings. We should come back to talk about Building 7. That could be a follow-up episode. But
were there planes?
Okay, or October 7th, right? You look at what happened on October 7th. You know, you can't like equate all Muslims with a few crazies. Like,
exactly.
Yeah, it's the same thing. You have to look at people as being people, and there's a spiritual connect. You know, so listen, you have Jews, Christians, Muslims, and anybody with any kind of religious foundation. We were all on the same side in terms of protesting the mandates, and you shouldn't let this crisis prevent you from being on the same side in terms of preparing for the next disaster that occurs.
Yeah.
Hold on, you want it? Yeah, great. You can grab whenever.
Are you gonna edit this later, or is this
no?
one
It's
shot?
all live.
We're live here.
It's not
we're
live.
Live.
We're not editing it. No,
it's nice out. Like there's no sun out today,
dude.
But it's beautiful.
This blanket's been saving my life, though, bro. It's been crazy.
You know, it's nice. But no, like I appreciate that we can have this conversation because the past few months have just been brutal. Like, you know, lost friendships, and it's like COVID.
This is actually a little bit worse because you're losing friends in your own group.
Exactly.
They throw the word Zionism around like it's a bad word, and I don't think it is, and I'll tell you why.
I'm listening.
Okay, Zionism is technically the term for a Jewish home in Israel. That's what it is. Like the definition of Zionism is it's a Jewish home in Israel. And what you're seeing with building settlements, you know, and the Likud party trying to go to war with Russia and using surveillance technology to test on the Palestinians against their will, and openly funding Hamas, and you know, taking 7 hours to respond to October 7th, and hosting and allowing a music festival to happen right on the southern border of Gaza. That's not Zionism. that is expansionism, that is imperialism, that is something entirely different, and people lump the idea of a Jewish home in Israel with all of that, and it's a misrepresentation.
I think that's fair. I think the term Zionism can be misapplied in certain cases. Like we could talk about the Balfour Declaration and Theodore Herzl and all these people, but at the end of the day, we wanna address the here and now, where we're at today. Like at the end of the day, we can't change what happened before now.
Absolutely not. No, you can only focus on the present. And people want to talk about the Nakba in 1948. Like that's going to do anything. What will do something is figuring out a way to avoid World War III. Or
Exactly.
if these people the ceasefire crowd, right? Like if you really want a ceasefire, you got to make it permanent, and you're not going to get a ceasefire
when you're funding the opposition.
Okay, you're not going to get a ceasefire as long as Hamas is in charge of Gaza. That's a fact. You're also not going to get a ceasefire if you have a bunch of cartoon villains in Israel that are controlling that government. Mm-hmm. You want a ceasefire, you need new elections in each region.
Yeah.
And the Israeli people, that there were massive protests in Israel leading up to October 7th against Netanyahu.
Exactly.
And these were Jews in Israel. But you got no protests in the Palestinian side. You can't be protesting Hamas in Gaza or the Palestinian side. They'll kill you.
Yeah. What's interesting, Alex, is, before all this stuff happened with COVID, I was really kind of invested emotionally in what was happening in Syria.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really pointing the finger at Israel so much as MI6 and British intelligence and how they were infiltrating the white helmets and this whole fake rescue operation with the supposed chemical weapons attacks and staged rescue operations that we were seeing in Syria, in Aleppo, in Douma, all these horrible attacks that were happening that, Bashar al-Assad is doing this to his own people. Let's not worry about the evidence. Just trust me. It was him.
Trust me, bro. We need ISIS. ISIS they're the good guys. Yeah, let's put ISIS in charge instead. Yeah.
Right. Is that the alternative? It was an al-Nusra.
Yeah, the alternative was ISIS.
It was al-Nusra, which is the Syrian front of al-Qaeda, who was founded by George Bush. The CIA, those are, the people don't want to trace in terms of, it is important to understand what led us to the current moment when you have the Mujahideen and the Cold War and arming the Afghani rebels that became Al-Qaeda later with Osama bin Laden. But, these were things that I was very outspoken about. I was going on Facebook, going back and forth with friends and family. But, okay, wait, are we really condemning, this supposedly democratically elected government in Syria and taking the side of these terrorists that are posing as rescue workers? And you had the Oscars award. I don't know if you're familiar with the White Helmet, documentary that came out on Netflix, and they gave an Oscar to it. It was a whole freaking propaganda,
against Assad. I want to actually watch
campaign.
It now.
It's insane, and it's been whitewashed ever since this whole thing about, and that was the precursor to what we're still dealing with now with Russia. All these things at the end of the day, it comes back to what we're over here in America. We're the beneficiaries of this global military machine.
Well, for now, but we have people
have been,
a bunch of 20-year-old men can barely do a push-up or a pull-up right now, and now you got to flood the border. Now you got to flood the border with military-age men from third world countries to fill a need that we're not able to have anymore. It's literally the symptom of late-stage empire
and
collapse.
Just the past 24 hours, we're hearing for the first time about a potential draft, and the communist Chinese are being mobilized to take over the U.S.
There's
somehow.
not going to be a draft. There's not going to be a draft. Nobody's going to consent to it.
I know I'm not.
Nobody's consenting to that. What's going to happen? My hypothesis is that tens of thousands of military-age men are flooding the border, and one of the reasons that they could be flooding the border is that if we have to go to war in a foreign country, you have a group of people that you can mobilize to go fight the foreign war that we don't want to fight anymore. Mm-hmm. And then they can get citizenship. And then they can become police officers, in
Chicago they already are.
And then they become county officials, and then they can get elected to positions of government. And then all of a sudden, you see that there was a Boston City Council woman who just got elected, hardcore communist
in Boston.
Wasn't when they were swearing in, she wasn't putting her hand on her heart. She wasn't even repeating the words. She totally was tuned out to it. And so all of a sudden, you get a whole group of illegal immigrants are going to be feeling the exact same way, hypothetically, to that lady. they're gonna have no problems go to your house and try to take your firearm from you. They're gonna have no problems searching you to make sure that you have your cell phone and your digital ID on you when you go to the store. They're gonna have no problems arresting you for not being updated on your latest vaccines. They're gonna have no problems beating the crap out of you because you're speaking at a school board meeting. And so that's what this is ultimately leading to. It's a soft form of tyranny. Another factor too is that with we're going off from the draft, right? But another thing too is that we're not reproducing. Like the whole hookup culture and like the normalizing abortions and the chemicals that we have in our food.
And other chemicals and other things.
We're not producing children as much anymore.
This is a fact.
We have a fertility crisis.
Yeah.
Well, dude, Latin Americans don't have that problem.
they're bringing their
they don't have that problem.
Those groups that aren't just fighting age men, there are some ladies and carrying their kids across the river too.
And they're gonna and that culture is conducive to having lots of kids. They tell us not to have kids, but great replacement. I hate saying those people, but they're having kids.
It's the great replacement.
It is a great replacement, yes.
So, I think this goes back to where we kind of started with 2024. Like, oh, maybe nothing's going to happen. Things are already happening.
It's happening,
already
but
setting the stage.
They're setting the stage, but this could be kind of like where they're. You ever look at a stock, like how stocks chart, right? And all of a sudden you have a big spike, and then you have consolidation, and you either have a plop or a spike. Right now, this is going to be this. I feel like 2024 might just be a period of consolidation.
I mean, we're kind of due for a spike, though, aren't we?
Why? 2020. Why? We had a big spike in 2020, big spike in 2021. 2022 was actually really big with the whole abortion stuff. We had something with Hamas on October 7th. And even October 7th, it's not dividing us as much in America. It's not dividing us, well, at least in Texas. In Europe, it's really bad, right? But in America, it's not. The spike is not nearly as bad.
It's hard to quantify, right? Like you said, the online discourse and the on the go, in person.
Are you seeing the protest though in Europe though? The Palestinian protests.
It's massive.
It's insane. I would be actually seeing that shit. I would actually be scared to be a Jew in Europe because there was a video in Dagestan where there was a bunch of people that were trying to find Jews at the mall and attack them at the mall. You're seeing a lot of shit. You're not seeing this stuff here in America, which is good. You're not seeing that here in Texas. Despite the fact,
let me tell you,
here in Texas, we can have good faith discussions about what to do, and be really respectful, and be yo, man, I don't care that you're Jewish, man. We just want to we just want people to have rights, and it becomes a very civil, polite, normal conversation that could lead to progress, right? But you go to New York City, you go to London, you go to Paris, you go to Germany. That ship has already sailed, and then when you see what's going on in those areas, and you're Jewish, you're yeah, bro, you have to be crazy to think I don't want to that I'm going to give up the right to have a place to go after seeing all these freaking videos all over Europe,
Yeah, I was going to say in New York, I can't speak to I haven't even been following,
I'm seeing videos. Just from me
yeah,
watching
right.
videos.
Me, but we've experienced it firsthand in New York. Again, fighting the mandates and the all the rallies and marches that we did the past few years. There was one particular case where you had Nick Fuentes show up with his
Groyper gang?
with his Groyper gang to infiltrate a rally that we had at Pfizer headquarters in November of 21. And he literally put out a flyer oh, come to our rally. We're going to be they looked up where we were going to be, what time, and they just put their, I forgot what they called it. They came up with some obscure unidentifiable website and group. And here comes Nick Fuentes with his bulletproof vest and tinted window SUV pulling up with his blue hat crew, Groyper crew, and they're literally throwing racial slurs at the Jewish folks that were there that day, and it's who the whole thing was a freaking theater show. It was it was a whole setup with the news cameras there Fox News, of all people, Fox News put out a story saying, oh, white supremacists, anti-Semites, anti-vaxxers, and later that day they went to Gracie Mansion. They had a whole face-off back and forth with Antifa or BLM contingency. They were showing up together, they were told to be there that night, and we were who the hell is this guy? You never even contacted us. Are you really here for medical freedom and against the mandates and the jabs? like, oh yeah, and he goes up there, this is my town. The guy's freaking nuts. And ever since then, last year you had Kanye and Nick Fuentes and this whole like ridiculous, showing up on Alex Jones and all this like ridiculous theater, like extreme neo-Nazi rhetoric coming out of them. And like, and we learn in retrospect that you have straight up handlers and like high level people that have controlled Kanye. And it's like, at the end of the day, all that's to say that there are people out there spouting unacceptable things toward Jews, and like everyone should unanimously be against that. But to prop that up and say that you're this, if you're calling for an end to bloodshed in Gaza, it's like, it's a complete disconnect.
You can't throw the word Hamas supporter at everybody, just like they're calling you a grandma killer and all that stuff.
Exactly.
I kind of made that mistake in the very beginning after everything because it was kind of crazy to handle.
It was a lot. It was traumatizing.
But yeah, I think that generally speaking, if you're gonna win the plot and actually stop this from escalating, and also you have skin in the game a little bit. With that being said, you can't be using George Bush era or Ronald Reagan Cold War 1980s language. And at the same time, you can't be using the rules for radical communist DSA playbook as well. Like, you have to just have a normal conversation about what's actually going on.
It's so crazy because I grew up liberal, mainline Democrat family.
Yeah,
I became more of a progressive during like when Bernie ran.
I voted for Bernie in the party.
But like ever since COVID and like, standing shoulder to shoulder with a lot of conservatives and Trump supporters, I didn't even vote in 2020 because I was just over the whole.
I voted Trump because of how mad I was about
like
the lockdowns.
After what happened to Bernie, it's like, how am I going to trust an election again when they're controlling the machines and the count with Wi-Fi connected computers that are just fractionalizing.
So I think the voter fraud thing is also a psyop. I think what's happening is that you're getting more. You're getting the fraud is kind of occurring more through the internet, through bot accounts manipulating a narrative than they actually are by changing votes. I would not be surprised. I would not be surprised if that's more what it is.
At the end of the day, this goes back to 2000 with Bush and Gore in Florida, and then 2004 in Ohio
with Kerry. Yes,
with Kerry in Ohio, they were doing the same.
But it was
thing
also
with the
so
computers.
close. It was also so close,
right,
where they were able to. And I think that with Trump, right, in 2020, like, I don't know if Trump won or lost. Like, there is a real possibility that he did lose because, like, the electioneering and the manipulation occurred because a bunch of Democratic bots overruled the system and manipulated consent to go and vote for Biden. A lot of the progressive Bernie voters that marched in droves for BLM, they bit their tongue. Whoa. And I know a lot of them. They bit their tongue, voted for Joe Biden. A lot of them did that in swing states. Like, whether a fraud occurred or not, it was so neck and neck that they were able to get away with it because the margin was so small.
I mean, like, again, I'm in no way a Trump supporter. I was there in D.C. to see what these people were about. They're calling
You're
out.
about to go. You're being a gulag if he's. No, I'm kidding.
No, I've been open about the fact like going down to D.C. and like, okay, people are gonna protest about the the outcome of the election and raise questions about the integrity. Okay, what are we doing about it? Okay, there's a whole freaking FBI setup with the infiltrators and Ray Epps and all these people set and the police just like inviting people to walk in the building, but it's all been exposed now. If you talk about the influence through social media and suppressing the stories about Hunter Biden and all these things influencing voters, like I was saying, going back over 20 years, you had Diebold, Premier, ES&S, Election System Management, like all these private companies contract who are Democrat donors, or at the end of the day, it's not about party, because you had Bush winning the first two times. At the end of the day, whoever's going to push the neocon agenda, like you have Bush and Kerry, who are both on the team.
And Biden's kind of a neocon also. With Ukraine and everything.
Of course he is.
Huge neocon.
No, when you say neocon, it's not about party or
Republican. You want to know also why we're not intervening in these countries?
You're a war hawk.
You want to know why we're also not intervening? Because we're not physically. Our military is actually, I think, a paper tiger, where we're just not physically capable of going into these places and actually winning, and then our ruse gets exposed because, dude, we got a bunch of they thems, and we raised a bunch of they them pronoun people who don't even know what gender they are. Like, you think they're gonna make it in a third world country?
I mean, look what happened in Afghanistan. How this was before the whole LGBT thing with the military.
But that also happened too because we were soldiers were being instructed by high-level operatives not to finish missions, to stay there, because it was more of an incentive to stay in the region than there was to actually win.
Yeah, the whole thing was to patrol the opium fields and patrol enable the drug trade, which led to where we're at now.
And
all
also
this
continue
fentanyl.
destroying these countries so Halliburton could come in and rebuild, and also get the central banks to continue printing up money. The defense stocks flourish. Like, a lot of that. There's a lot of that.
It's a lot. Yeah, man. We're on the same page.
And also, if you want to create one world, if you want to create global tyranny, the more you destabilize this region over a longer period of time, the more migrants the more people from these countries have to come and migrate to either Europe or America, and then you get more of these attacks in those countries, and then all of a sudden now you have to censor the internet. Now you need a digital ID. Now we got to stop misinformation, because misinformation leads to terrorism. They're trying to in the beginning say that crypto and Bitcoin funded Hamas, and then that turned out to be false. But like they are going to try to throw everything out there to try to like use these crises to restrict your freedoms.
Well, then I was going to say that earlier about the migrant situation in New York and throughout the country now. This is a perfect setup for rising crime, for instability, and for people clamoring for a police state and for a surveillance state. Oh, we need to and even with elections, we need to vet who these people. We need some kind of mechanism to identify these people. We don't know who's who. We're gonna need some kind of I don't know ID to identify who these people. There's however many million people just pouring in. What are we gonna do about it? Oh, I guess that's just gonna have to be the answer. And you know what's gonna happen? You're gonna have bipartisan support.
Well, anytime you got bipartisan
you're gonna have Trump supporters welcoming it.
Dude, listen. Donald Trump could sell you communism, and then the supporters will say that he's playing advanced 5D chess.
Facts.
Kind of is what happened during COVID.
That's exactly what happened. Best vaccine ever.
The central bank digital currencies.
This was the best vaccine ever. Sorry.
What do you think you're going to get a central bank digital currency?
I think we already have a central bank digital currency.
How?
I think we already have it because we're using Venmo, Cash App, PayPal. We're using who uses cash anymore? Like people use cash, but like more and more like people are it's becoming more and more convenient to walk around.
Parallel systems are there. People are also the same people that bitch about their freedoms and complain about being censored and all this other stuff and are super blackpilled. They don't own any fucking Bitcoin. They don't do any. They don't actually transact outside the system, and they still are like, oh no, I'll take a Venmo payment.
I was getting into crypto and Bitcoin, and like I got out at the complete wrong time, right when the election happened in 2020. And
you fucked up. Why did you do that?
And I was able to trade a little bit and make some money, like with altcoins and whatever trading. But at the end of the day, like my concern, and I hope you're right, Alex, that this doesn't happen anytime soon. But if there's some kind of like EMP like grid issue, or like who knows what they're capable of. You look up World Economic Forum Cyber Polygon.
They have a whole
predictive programming.
But they're not going to be able to like shut down your they'll shut down the internet, but they're not going to if they're going to want to do the cyber attack right. Eventually, they have to turn the internet back on. They have to turn it back on.
How? Okay, so the trick with, and at the end of the day, the beautiful thing about crypto is that they're like it's
Bitcoin,
decentralized.
Bitcoin, not crypto. All these other cryptos are
not all of them. There's other altcoins, but you could talk about just specifically Bitcoin is decentralized. Supposedly, you don't have any central actor.
There's no supposedly.
It's a decentralized blockchain.
15,000 node operators have to all validate a transaction. They're scattered all over the world.
The issue is what is centralized is the exchanges, right?
Okay,
if you know about
if you
crypto
on Coinbase or Cash App or Binance or anything, these are not your coin. There's a saying, not your keys, not your coin.
Right.
We know this, okay?
I mean,
If you have,
not enough people know, and
but
I got to get back
me
into
and you know
it.
this, okay?
Yeah.
And this is what we're talking about. This is what we're talking about when it comes to being able to participate in a parallel economy, not having this add on to the continued economy, to this economy, to the fiat economy. Okay. If you have your stuff in cold, like in a Trezor, a cold card, or a multi sig, like a company like an Unchained Capital or something like that, your money is yours. No one can take your stuff unless they know your phrases, which you don't share with anybody. Okay, like your stuff is yours. So even if like the grid goes down, like they can't go in and like hack they can't like hack the balances that are in your wallet. Like it just means that like you just can't use and transact with the money that's in your wallet for the time that the internet is down.
I have to be honest, Alex. Like, and it's At this point, I want to like
Potentially
keep chipping away and peeling back that onion, but I've become so disillusioned with a lot of this kind of like new age hipster like culture. What I mean is like the communities in El Salvador and other parts of the world where you have expats thriving and living their best life with just Bitcoin. I have a hard
the only
time.
Thing you should own. I just think
Right.
being able to use it and have some of it to
it's
like,
definitely good to have as an
there's
option.
There's a usefulness to having something like that, and if you have self custody, and there are ways to use Bitcoin without the system. Like you have a cold card, and you put the cold card, and and like let's say you want to spend your Bitcoin, you put the cold card to a Blue wallet or a Moon wallet, and then I send Bitcoin to you for meat or for food or something like that. Like you can do that without having to operate within that system, and then no one's gonna stop or censor you or stop you from participating in society. Like that is a good thing. More people should understand how to use that system. The reason I think people are so disillusioned with Bitcoin is because they buy things on these exchanges. The exchanges go bunk. People maybe lose their life savings, or they hear stories about that, and all of a sudden they're like, "Oh no, it's a scam, bro. Fuck that." And then they have to use these useless dollars that devalue at 10% every year.
My thing is, I think more and more people need to, and more people are aspiring to a return to like how our ancestors lived. Gold and silver, and just like developing a localized barter economy and like having land to grow your own food and have
which is good. But Bitcoin facilitates that because having like being able to transact Bitcoin peer to peer is like the definition of what a localized economy is.
Yeah, but the next step to that is being completely off grid and just not even, and I'm nowhere close to that. Like let's not kid ourselves. Like I'm on my phone all freaking day trying to keep track of what's going on. But eventually, we need to, explore the option of just like having a stack of books, having families, having communities where we can just like communicate with each other and play music and just like sing and dance and like
maybe
you know what I'm saying.
But we wouldn't be having this like if it wasn't for the internet, if it wasn't for being able to have knowledge accessible to you at the click of a button, me and you would not be having this discussion that could reach a bunch of people.
I was gonna say that earlier. You're talking about the internet and social media. I think what not enough people understand is that the internet was invented as a government surveillance tool, as a weapon.
Back,
exactly.
The Unabomber Elstein.
It was Stanford University in the 50s. You had the CIA, DARPA, ARPANET project as a pet project for surveillance of dissident like whatever movements. And like going into the 70s and 80s, the first computers that we had were developed as through military contracts, but once it rolls out in the 90s for public consumption and consumerism, then it's a convenience and it's a major tool, beneficial tool for information sharing,
while allowing the government to spy on dissidents.
Exactly. It was all the whole thing from the beginning was at that cost of your privacy. And at the end of the day, your data, even if you're using free services, at the end of the day, you're selling your data and your engagement, you're selling
right now. But you don't think that there's going to be a way to build out from that, like using like open source computing or something like that to help,
like Linux, or what? What do you mean by open source computing?
I don't know, like computing built like
it sounds good.
Yeah, like look, you look at Bitcoin, right, and it's a new revolutionary form of money based on computing power, right? Like using maybe that network to build like computing models or internet models that you don't have like a centralized overseer being able to look at what you're browsing through.
That sounds great. Yeah, I don't know. Like, you know,
I
and
think
you
we
have
need to be talking about that more than like complaining or being scared of disasters. Being like, okay, the disaster's coming. What are we building to protect ourselves?
Exactly.
What are we building so that not even protect yourself? What are we building so that we can thrive in the disaster? Because I look at this like
it's an opportunity.
Yeah,
It's
like
a huge
disasters
opportunity.
are not disasters; they are opportunities. So it's like, all right, how am I going to thrive during the next disaster?
You're gonna have a huge transfer of wealth, and you know, my thing is understanding the bond market and understanding the Social Security system and the IRS, the tax code, and how they use our name as, you know, as collateral through every and you know what they wind up how they wind up convincing us that, oh, we have to pay taxes or else we're gonna come, you know, kidnap you, and just how, and it even relates to the BLM movement and like police abuse, which is a real thing. Because, you know, you talk about law enforcement versus...
Well, how did they treat people who were protesting the mandates and then BLM didn't give a shit about that?
Like we had some BLM people marching with us.
Did you really?
Very few, but we had some cross-pollination.
How did that work out?
Well, when Kyrie Irving had his first game, I don't know if you heard, in 21, the first time they benched him for being unjabbed, we showed up and we met beforehand, and we had a mutual contact with Hawk Newsom and Kevin McCall and some other folks.
Oh yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
I was one of the, you know, we had a rally before that game with Jimmy Levy and a bunch of other freedom folks.
That's kind of cool, actually. Yeah.
And we marched down to Barclays Center. This was late October 21. I can't remember the day. And you had Hawk Newsom and a bunch of other BLM folks, you know, raising hell with us. And
yeah, that's actually
next
kind of
thing
cool.
You know, it was great. It was beautiful. It was also kind of like sketchy because next thing you know, certain people are hopping the barricades and rushing the door of the stadium and blocking the entrance. So we're causing a disruption, and like we're there, me and Joe.
But he wasn't doing that, right? He didn't see, like, I seen him speak.
I'm not here to throw anyone under the bus.
But I've heard that guy speak. I've heard that guy like talk about the mandates and the jabs, and I was just like,
we were on the same page
I'm
as
like,
far
you know
as
what,
the
man?
mandates
Like,
go.
Keep talking like this, and I might start supporting
That
BLM,
was the
right?
only,
Like
that was the
how
only
I was
time
looking at it.
In the case of Hawk, that was the only time we directly like.
But then sorry about
it's okay.
interrupting you, but then like, you know, back in January of 2022, he was vocally talking about how Joe Rogan needs to be removed from the internet.
That was January 22?
Yeah.
That sounds about right. Yeah, no, Rogan's such an extremist. Such an extremist. He really should be in a camp or something.
Yeah.
He needs to be.
Yeah. We should all be roommates to be cool.
Like he's kind of an idiot. He just needs to be re-educated a little bit.
Yeah.
You know. What's up, Joe? Yeah.
Yes, I remember that, and I'm just like, oh yeah, I don't think I like you anymore after I saw that, you know. Like,
no, he's, you know, at the end of the day, when it comes to BLM, we're talking about it's the same thing with like you mentioned the Palestine protests and how they become a political, it's being used as a political weapon, whether that particular chapter is related to the national BLM organization with Patrice colors and all these millions of dollars going into buying mansions. We're talking about deliberate destruction of what we call law enforcement and any sort of apparatus to prevent crime.
Yeah.
It's a deliberate I'm blanking on my words here. It's a deliberate setup to create worse crime, civil unrest, so that people will clamor for some kind of stronger.
Well, look at San Francisco
mechanism.
now. Everything is locked. Like, you can't go to Walgreens without having to have somebody open the door to get your shampoo.
It's so sad, man. You know, I grew up not far. You know, I didn't grow up. I grew up close enough to spend a lot of time in San Francisco. It's a beautiful city.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful city, and people there have just lost their God-given minds. How
does that happen in a place like that? But then in a place like even Austin's pretty liberal, but like people in Austin haven't really lost their minds.
Yeah, I think in the case of San Francisco, you know, military contractors and CIA plants to drug the populace with LSD will go a long way. In the 60s, and the Grateful Dead and the whole Summer of Love movement, born in San Francisco, you know, Haight Ashbury, that was I think that was a real turning point in the Bay Area, where you already had like a military base with Moffett Field. You go up 101, you see a military air base, Moffett Field, which is just maybe 20-30 minutes from Stanford University, where you have the linear accelerator and you have the ARPANET lab. Stanford University. So you have all these little military outposts in the Bay Area where they're basically experimenting on people and like seeing, you know, how we can feminize men and like.
But then also Reagan, right before leaving office, signed a law like giving citizenship and amnesty to a bunch of illegal aliens, and it just turned California blue as well.
Yeah, man. It's sad. Like there's a lot of like bold freedom fighters in Orange County, in the Central Valley, like in the northern part of the state. There's people just like in New York, man. Some of the strongest people
they're
I've
probably
ever met.
stronger than what you'll find in Texas because
exactly.
they have to be, actually, you know.
Exactly, and you know, I'm here in Texas now. I've gone back and forth to New York. You know, it's like my wife and I reached the point where we want to start a family. We want to, you know, build a nest and plant our feet somewhere for the future, long term. But you know, I'm still in it to like hold people like Bill De Blasio and Andrew Cuomo, Kathy Hochul, Eric Adams. These sociopaths need to be held accountable for what they've done.
They do, and you got to figure out how to do it in a way that works.
We can talk more about that another time.
We should
maybe
talk more about that another time. So
it's happening.
Yeah. Well, how strict? Before we go, like, how strict were they at actually enforcing these mandates in New York?
Well, I can tell you in January of 22, it was strict enough that I wound up spending 2 hours behind bars for going into the Museum of Natural History.
Wait, what? Did they ask to see your paper and then you just said no one walked in?
I mean, I made my reservation with the Museum of Natural History. You don't have to pay for your ticket. You make a reservation,
yes,
and you show your ticket by email.
Yeah.
And you know, and they're asking for. You know, they asked. I said no, and there were several other cases where we went into Cheesecake Factory, Applebee's, we went into Burger King, Bubba Gump Shrimp, all the the
chains.
Yeah, so it's like we did what we had to do to hold up the mirror to the NYPD, and it was kind of a controversial move on our part. And like a couple months before that, it's like we had done what we did with Hawk Newsome and BLM, and we don't. You know, we're not trying to create antagonism toward the police.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, everything we did in New York, bring thousands of people on a weekly basis at the height of the mandates. We had thousands of people. We were working with NYPD, with every precinct, every part of the city to make sure that our marches were safe and family friendly. And we didn't, you know, if anyone tried to like infiltrate or agents provocateur,
did you say,
we shut it down.
When Nick Fuentes went there, what did you say to him? Like, did you?
I wasn't actually there that day. I was in San Antonio.
Oh,
that
wow.
day.
Okay,
a lot, like even our like the New York crew, our leadership had come out. It was mostly nurses and city workers who came to host that event, and there wasn't even any direct confrontation because he went and set up his thing over like further up the block by 2nd Avenue. Nick was too much of a coward. I'm sorry to say, Nick. But Nick was too much of a coward to address us directly.
So he had a separate rally like across the street from you guys?
It was down further up the block, yeah.
With a bunch of security guards?
He had a couple security, and you know the NYPD. Unfortunately, I mean, at the end of the day, their First Amendment right was respected, in spite of the fact that we went we jumped through the hoops to get our permit,
and he didn't.
But at the end of the day, he has the right to do that, but it's a little suspicious.
Yes, and then when people like, you know, these groypers talk about who like call everyone controlled ops, like, dude, that someone like Nick Fuentes crashing an anti-mandate rally and saying a bunch of anti-Semitic garbage, that is the definition of controlled op.
I think that's a safe
bet.
compares, a safe assessment. But we've been through so many other cases lately. That's kind of the most high profile figure that we dealt with. But there's so many cases where people, want to cause drama and cause, at the end of the day, we're fighting. It's the same thing with Israel, Palestine, whatever side you're on. We want to fight for the babies and the innocent people. We don't want to see any death.
Yeah, no, facts. You don't want to see that.
And
you don't.
And you don't want to let politics and ideology, even religion, like, at the end of the day, it comes down to your relationship with God.
With God, and
not with the
and you
institution.
should never be bullied into like having to choose a side.
Yeah.
And anybody who bullies you into picking a side, you need to get as far away from them as possible and not associate, regardless of where you stand. And I guess just because of all the videos of the protests you're seeing, maybe I'm looking at one side as more of the bully than the other. But the bullying occurs in different factions, and you just got to be able to look. As long as you're fair and reasonable with how you speak about an issue,
definitely.
You should be okay.
We're not gonna get anywhere. And look, I've made that mistake with like being hard on people. Like, well, why are you getting this freaking jab? You're an idiot. Why are you wearing that stupid mask on your face? Like, a lot of us were frustrated in 2021. Like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this to your baby? Like, but at the end of the day,
yeah. Did people have fakes? Like, I feel like I have a lot of friends who just didn't get the shot in New York, or a couple, and they're like, yeah, I just had a fake, and nobody really bothered me when I had my fake card.
Yeah, I mean, but we most of us in the freedom rallies,
but having a fake card defeats the purpose, because
it's defeating the purpose. You're feeding into
that system. You're feeding into that system.
You're legitimizing the system.
You're legitimizing that system of control, saying that now you have to carry this document, and eventually they're going to say, oh, because of all the fake cards, now it has to be digital. So you're actually like, even playing along with that is actually, it's almost worse than getting it.
Yeah, no, I had good friends who did that, and it's like they weren't they weren't trying to like get in any altercations or
But like most bars and clubs,
people had to make ends meet.
They didn't scrutinize
you had active duty police officers. You had this poor woman in Long Island who made fake cards for hundreds of people at least, and she got busted, and I think she might have gotten sentenced to prison for whatever they charged her with. It was totally heavy-handed, and you had active NYPD benefiting from that. And that's what I said when I got arrested. I said to the captain, like, look, when this is all over, we'll all go get a beer together. You guys can pick the spot. You and your fake cards, you can pick a spot where we can all go get a beer together, and we'll laugh this off. It's no hard feelings.
So when you were in jail, how was jail before we go?
It was pretty disgusting. That toilet was...
Were you like... Did you make friends? Like, how long? You were there for 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
Did anybody try to fuck with you while you were in jail?
No. It was like...
It was all just a bunch of guys like you that were all there,
Yeah, it was the Upper West Side. Like they never deal, like it was pretty quiet. Like the lady female cop on our in our wing was very sympathetic to. We were just kind of telling her, what's going on, and it was overwhelmingly every single cop that we interacted with over the course of that year expressed solidarity, if not outwardly, then implicitly. Like, yeah, well, yeah, well, yeah, I guess.
Sorry, it's protocol. We got to do it. Yeah.
No, you're right. I don't disagree. I'm just doing my job. I got to feed my kids.
When I haven't had to deal with cops because of vaccines, but like, they threw me out of City Hall like a year and a half ago for not wanting to wear a mask. And I was filming with the security guards. Like, look, man, I know what this is ridiculous, and you know it. You know it's ridiculous. He's looking at me. You could just see by the look on his face, like, yeah, we know.
I mean, how many places in Austin were checking for jab? Like
0, because it was not allowed in Texas. 0.
I feel like there were a couple cases where I saw
No, there were a
sign
couple places
outside.
where they tried, but they were not allowed to. There were like 2 restaurants that said we were going to be doing this, but it was not allowed. Like they didn't allow.
No, but
nobody ever asked me to show a vaccine card. There were stores that tried to tell me to put a mask on when I went in, and I would be like, no, go fuck yourself. I'm not putting that. Not doing that anymore. We're leaving. Goodbye.
Yeah, no, there were definitely a couple places where I went in early on.
I've had people I've had food truck guys try to do that, and like a couple times I've been so hungry that I'm like, fine. I had like some like Spider-Man. I had like some kind of mask on.
Food trucks?
There's a couple food trucks that did this. Yeah. I was like, dude, we're outside. This is retarded. And I'm like, okay, fine. Cool. Let me get exact change now from what I ordered. Because you're not getting a
We're
fucking
not
tip
too
if you're
far.
gonna do that.
Maybe we're not too far off here from San Francisco. I don't know.
No,
it
was like 2 food trucks out of every. Like, it was.
That's not too bad.
It's not too bad. All right, Kevin, how do we get a hold of you?
So you can reach New York Freedom Rally, NY Freedom Rally through Instagram, Twitter, Telegram as well. We're putting the pieces in place to start a community trust so that we can build up the community in New York, and create more opportunities for homeschooling, for food security, starting pantries, starting getting prepped, and in the city it's challenging, but we're doing what we have to do to prepare ourselves for whatever comes next. And I'm just so grateful to meet folks with conviction and discernment like yourself. And there's so many crazy things happening in the world that we people can dissect and pick apart, but at the end of the day we want to forge a future for our children. And yeah, I'm grateful to have met you, and
I'm grateful
this
too.
was a lot of
This
fun.
is fun. Yeah, we always kept running into each other at different events.
Yeah.
So this is.
Yeah.
I'm glad we got to do this.
Absolutely.
Kevin,
appreciate it, man.
thank you so much for coming on,
God
man.
bless.
All right.